Hey guys, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be doing our official NFL season predictions. We're going to be going through every single team in the AFC, every single team in the NFC, all of our awards, and all of our playoffs with our Super Bowl prediction, our MVP predictions, everything that you want to hear about the NFL season, we will have right here. We'll have more that's wrong than that is right, but hopefully we get some hot takes out here, and some of them maybe will go over well. And like I said, there's going to be a lot that are wrong, but hopefully we have more that we get right.
Yeah, and this is always fun. There's going to be a lot of mishaps, mistakes, but hey, if we call something right, we're going to make sure you know about it. So let's get straight to it. Let's start with the AFC North.
Yeah, starting off with the AFC North, the most competitive division this year, from 1 through 4 in this division. It's going to be very interesting. With my rankings right now, I have the Bengals going 14-3. They're my number one seed overall in the AFC this year. They're coming off of a good year last year. Obviously, they couldn't get over the Chiefs like they have been able to, but I still think this is going to be a good year for them overall. I have the Ravens going 13-4. I think Lamar Jackson's going to have a big comeback year, and this team is going to be good. The Steelers at 10-7 and the Browns at 9-8. I also do have the Ravens at 13-4. They are my fifth seed. They're the first wild card seed. All of these teams are going to be competitive this year, and I predicted them to all have a winning record, and I see that going to happen. There's going to be a lot of question marks with the Ravens overall with Lamar Jackson, so we could see another team. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a team, maybe the Steelers or the Browns. I mean, both of those teams, the Browns obviously have Deshaun Watson. They can get back up to a very good level of football, and it's going to be a very competitive division.
Yeah. And in the AFC North, first off, I have the Bengals going 13-4. Joe Burrow will be ready to roll after an injury scare during the preseason, and mixed with the Bengals wide receiver core, which is probably the best in the league. I have some confidence there. I want to mention their DN duo of Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson, too. One of the most productive edge rushing duos in the league right now. And the defensive backs worry me a little bit, but DJ Turner is a guy we talked about a lot in our draft videos. He's a corner that I really hope gets some playing time this year for the Bengals because I think he'll be really successful. Next up, I have the Ravens also getting a playoff spot. I have them going 11-6. I'm super interested to see what Odell's role is going to be for the Ravens. If he is a real contributor like he has been later in his career with like a team like the Rams, I think that's going to be super exciting. If not, he's obviously going to have to lean heavier on guys like Bateman and Zay Flowers. Odafe Owe and David Ajabo are going to be super good linebackers in this 3-4. At least I hope so. I think they have a lot of room to develop. And the running game is going to be interesting. Obviously, Lamar is a top-tier runner at the quarterback position, but it's time to see if J.K. Dobbins can just get a full healthy season under his belt and perform. So I've been going 11-6. Steelers, I have 9-8 in the third spot. I want to see Kenny Pickett work out so bad. I think this year is the year if there ever is going to be one. And the secondary is super exciting. Your guy, Joey Porter Jr. out of Penn State, should have a big year. And with a mentor like Patrick Peterson hanging out back there, I think it's going to be a super good thing for his career. And it's time to see if Najee is real or not. And if he is, the Steelers team could overperform. If not, 9 wins might be a stretch. But in the last spot, I have the Browns also going 9-8. So I also have every team with a winning record here. The Deshaun Watson experience is coming to Cleveland. Doesn't even sound very exciting. Obviously, he was a top 5 QB in the league at one point. He's just not there right now. If things work out in Cleveland, that's good for him. But it's going to be the first year. These other teams have guys I'm a little more confident in up till this point, aside from Kenny Pickett, who I think is going to have a big year in his own right. But Deshaun Watson hopefully gets the full year under his belt. Maybe this Cleveland team overperforms. I just don't see him being better than any other team in the AFC North right now. 9-8 is where I have him.
Yeah, and we both know the Bengals are going to be really good this season. So between the Ravens, the Steelers, and the Browns, any of those teams by the end of the year, there's a lot of question marks, but there's a very high upside for all those teams. So I wouldn't be surprised if one, maybe even two of those teams end up with playoff spots with the way the rest of the AFC is this year. Next up, we're going to move to the AFC South. This division overall, not very competitive, which makes it easy for me. The Jaguars, I have them going 12-5. I'm very high on them this season. I know their win record is projected about 9.5 wins. I think they're going to soar over this. Trevor Lawrence showed last year that he is the quarterback of the future for them and just one of the best quarterback prospects that we've seen in a while. I know a lot of people forgot about that after his first year. Some people were even ready to label him a bust. He did have probably the worst coach in NFL history last year, had a real coach in Doug Peterson. They came out and they performed very well. This team is built very well. They've been built up for the past few years, and they got their quarterback, and I think they're going to go out and perform. Next up, I have the Titans going 8-9, and I just don't think this team is very good overall. And they've kind of been sitting around that 10 to 8 win area the past few years. They had their chance to compete with Ryan Tannehill when he was a serviceable quarterback and Derrick Henry. Now I think it's basically just going to fall into Derrick Henry, and I don't think they're going to be that great. They're going to be a mid team this year. Next up, I have the Colts going 4-13 and the Texans going 3-14. Just not very good teams overall. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Colts even end up last in this division. I have more upside on the Texans, especially with the Colts looking to get rid of Jonathan Taylor. I don't really know what's going to happen with that team overall after that. But both teams do have a rookie quarterback that I'm excited to watch. So we'll see what happens with that. I just think they just aren't great teams overall at this point.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. My number one spot, I also have the Jaguars. I have them going 11-6. The AFC South is super weak. That's going to help them out with their schedule quite a bit. And it's time for Trevor Lawrence to make that superstar step. As you mentioned, we saw last year, he really is the guy that was worth all the hype that he got going into the draft. Now it's time for him to cement himself as one of those top 5 guys, one of those top 7 guys, you know. Defense, I want to talk about a little bit too. Trayvon Walker, already kind of getting swept up under the rug a little bit. He was obviously the number 1 pick just a couple years ago, just last year even. And he's going to be the team's X factor. If he plays like a number 1 overall pick, then I'm really not worried about Jacksonville getting stops. And obviously getting Calvin Ridley to pair with Trevor Lawrence is going to be really big. Had to sit out last year because of the gambling stuff. Now he's ready to play, and he's a really solid receiver. If him and Lawrence can build a connection together, that's going to be a super exciting offense. Number 2, I also have the Titans going 8-9. Obviously, the big storyline is the quarterback position. Derrick Henry, you know, they love to run the ball, but who's going to throw it? Is Tannehill really on his last leg? Is it going to be Malik Willis? Is it going to be Will Levis? Having a 3-headed monster is the best possible situation in the NFL. Unfortunately, not when it's the quarterback and not when none of them are monsters. So it's going to be kind of tough there. Mike Vrabel is going to coach a good defense. Obviously, Jeffrey Simmons, Harold Landry, they're going to step up when it matters, but to more than 8 wins, I would be surprised. 3, I also have the Colts having going 6-11. Jonathan Taylor's situation is going to be big. And if you remember my takes from the NFL draft process, I'm a huge Anthony Richardson fan. With that being said, I don't know if he's ready to start right away in the NFL. Doesn't have a lot of experience at any level of football, but I still think he's going to be a stud. Maybe just not yet, and maybe he needs a little more around him, especially if Taylor's on the way out. Kwity Paye is a name to look out for on defense. I think on the opposite side of Abuka, it's going to be a cool pass rush, maybe a developing one with some potential. And then lastly, I have the Texans going 5-12. I think they're just far away from competing right now. I think 5 is even a little bit too nice of a win total. The improvements to the O-line is going to give Stroud more time to work. But out of all the rookie quarterbacks right now, I'm the least impressed with Stroud. I know it's only the preseason. He has a lot of room to grow, but I just don't think he's ready to lead this Texans team to success right now. Really excited to see Will Anderson. I really hope he's one of those stud edge rushers that we have seen from the last couple of drafts. So if Will Anderson plays well, there's going to be bright spots on this defense, but Texans team just doesn't have it all together yet. 5-12 is a good spot for him.
Yeah. Overall, this division has a lot of upside. I just think some teams are a little far off at this point. Next up, we'll move over to the AFC West. The leading team in this division for me, I have the Chiefs going 13-4 again. I still think they're a great team. Last year, they didn't have very good of a wide receiver room. They don't this year either, but it's Patrick Mahomes, and having him by himself has the team's like very bottom floor at like 9 or 10 wins, and the team is still good overall, and I still think they're one of the best teams in the NFL. Next up, I have the Chargers going 12-5. I have them at my 7th seed in the AFC. I think they're going to be great this year, especially within this division. The bottom teams that I'll talk about in a second, the Broncos and the Raiders, aren't very good overall. So they'll definitely be competing with the Chiefs. Both of these teams, I only have a 1-win difference between them. So we could see things happen. The Chargers have been up for the past few years. And like you said about Trevor Lawrence earlier, I think this is Justin Herbert's time to finally get into that superstar status. And the team built around him, especially the wide receivers, if they can stay healthy, then this is going to be a hard team to stop offensively. And then we have the Broncos. I have them going 6-11 again. I know a lot of people are high on them this year. They think they're going to bounce back with a new coach. I just don't think that's going to change that much. Russell Wilson is getting older every single year, and he's not looking that great or very impressive. This team is still not very good overall, and they have a lot of trouble with injuries, and I don't think a new head coach is going to help them that much. And then I have the Raiders going 4-13. They don't even really know what's going on with the team overall. They have some good young pieces, but besides that, there's not very much to root for if you're a Raiders fan. Jimmy Garoppolo is not a good quarterback, in my opinion, and I just don't think they're going to be that great. But the Chiefs and the Chargers, both big teams to look out for, obviously. The Chiefs won the Super Bowl last year, and I wouldn't be surprised if they can make a big run this year. But the Chargers are going to be right there with them.
Yeah. And at number one, kind of following that same sentiment, I have the Chiefs going 13-4. When you have Mahomes, you're going to compete. When you have Andy Reid, you're going to compete. And luckily for the Chiefs, they have both. Their offense, we know how they run. It's creative. Kelsey being hurt early is a little scary, but I don't think it's going to come close to derailing their season or anything. And the defense, I love Chris Jones. I think he's going to have another big year, hopefully leading that defense to, the same level that they've been at recently, which has been very high. And then second, I have the Chargers. I have them going 10-7. Still gets them a playoff spot, but a little bit lower than you. And as you mentioned, just like Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert's got to make that step up to superstardom. In my opinion, they need to cement more of a running game, and I don't think that's on Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler is one of my favorite players in the league. I think he's super versatile, super good, and the Chargers love to use him in the passing game. I feel like in years past, they've been kind of scared to use him as a lead back in the way that they should be. They usually rotate him in and out on power running games or plays, and I really just think he should be their lead back at all times. Obviously, with the whole running back market right now, who knows what his value is, but just on the field play, he's super good. I want to see him even more involved than he has been. And at 3, I have the Broncos going 7-10, so in that similar range. And the questions are if Sean Payton can really make this team step up after a super weird offseason. And the Broncos struggle every year, it feels like, is if their superstars can stay healthy. And even not even their superstars, just their playmakers, especially a guy like Tim Patrick. I'm super excited to see Tim Patrick play football. He just is always hurt. And although that may seem minor, that could have been Russell Wilson's number one target this year, if we're being honest. And seeing him go out with injury early just sucks. This Broncos team has bad luck and a really tough schedule, so I don't love what I'm looking at. And the Raiders, I also have going 4-13, which I thought was really low. I'm glad we're on the same page here, but just in a tough division, I think they're noticeably worse than the Broncos, and the Broncos are the third team in the division. They're out of QB options, and if it continues to look like how it's looking right now, Davante Adams might force his way out by the trade deadline. And it doesn't happen a whole lot in football, but when you're a superstar like Davante Adams, who's going to be on a team like the Raiders, who is probably jolting themselves into a rebuild right about now, he might be on the way out. And if that's how your season goes, I don't expect you to get very many wins. Don't love the Raiders, so 4-13. Worst team in the AFC by my rankings. Not great.
Yeah. And if Davante Adams does make his way out, there's definitely one team that would make a big push for that, being the Jets. Talking about the Jets, we'll go to the AFC East right now. I'll let you start. Being a Patriots fan, I want to hear your overall thoughts on the division. And we've had a lot of similar predictions. I'm guessing this is probably where it might change a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And unfortunately, being a Patriots fan, I'm not talking about them first. Number one, I have the Bills. I've been going 12-5. And I'm super interested to see what they do with the running back room. I mean, we play fantasy football. So, I mean, if I have James Cook on my team, obviously I want him to get the ball. But it's real life. And I think Cook, Damian Harris, and Latavius Murray are all going to get a lot of touches in this backfield. Latavius Murray's whole career has been taking touches towards the red zone, taking them away from big running backs, whatever. He's a really solid back, always will be until he retires, in my opinion. Defense is strong, obviously. Getting a lot of guys back. Matt Milano is a really good linebacker. Loving, what he's done for Buffalo. And they're a regular season team so far. The real storyline is going to be what they do in the playoffs. I think we both know they're going to be in the playoffs. It's just what they can do when they get there. And at number 2, we've talked about the AFC East a lot just personally this offseason, so I don't know if this prediction is going to surprise you. I have the Jets going 10-7 and finishing second. Aaron Rodgers, the more I look at it, recruited a really good team around him. Obviously, the Jets built a lot of that themselves. And the defense is super exciting. It's going to be make or break if they can play at that high level like they did last year, especially with Sauce Gardner, guys like that, Quinn Williams. And that defense performed really well last year. They're going to have to this year, especially with a new quarterback. But that new quarterback is Aaron Rodgers at the end of the day. I'm not a huge fan of his, but we all know he can succeed. And looking at him playing against teams like the Dolphins and the Patriots, who I've yet to mention, I think the Jets just have the advantage. So at number 3, I'm going to put the Dolphins. I have them at 8 and 9, which is so much lower than a lot of places I've seen. But the running back situation, kind of like the Bills, is interesting. They have a lot of guys that are going to get touches. Right now, Mostert's the lead back, but is that going to change when A-Chain is fully healthy? And it really all lies on Tua. We have to bank on Tua being very healthy this year if the Dolphins have a chance, because if we can be honest, Mike White isn't bringing this team to double-digit wins. It just won't happen. And as much as I really like Tua, and I'm one of his biggest supporters out of anybody that does, like football podcasts like this, I really don't think he can stay healthy a full season, especially where he's at right now. I hope the best for him, but it's too much of a risk for a team that I see get penciled into double-digit wins kind of everywhere you look. So 8 and 9 is kind of where I have them. And then last in the division, which would really hurt my feelings, is the Patriots. I also have them 8 and 9. They're losing to Miami off a tiebreaker. I think I have the Dolphins beating them both times they play. They're just a couple pieces away. When you're a team that has a game manager QB, I look at a team like the Vikings, you need to have really big weapons around that game manager for it to work out. And the Patriots just don't have that. I mean, I like Ramondre. Getting Zeke is going to be fun. But the wide receiver core, even the tight end room, which is pretty solid, they just don't have these huge playmakers that allows Mac Jones to just play system quarterback. And he doesn't have the versatility to go out and do much more than that right now. The front seven, as a fan, is super interesting. I want to see Josh Uche develop this year, but I just don't see the Patriots making a big run.
Yeah. Speaking about the AFC East too, I also have the Bills at first. I have them going 12 and 5. Pretty much everything you've said. This team has been very good in the regular season the past few years. They just haven't been able to get over the Chiefs in the playoffs. And I'm not saying their window is closing, but every single year that they can't get to the Super Bowl, the window does shrink a little bit, especially with guys like Stephon Diggs, who aren't getting any younger every year. And there's a lot of question marks about if he's going to stay. He could be a guy who could be traded halfway through this season if they're starting to struggle. We've heard a lot about him wanting out, but I still do think overall they're a great team. They do have a good running back core, but with a guy like Josh Allen, the one thing you worry about is if the team will actually commit to a run. A lot of teams that have really high-end quarterbacks don't really want to commit to the run because they want to trust their quarterback and throw it a lot. But if this team can commit to the run and be a running team, and then maybe even throw second, if you throw second and have a good enough running attack and you have Josh Allen throwing second, his stats are going to go down, but that makes the team even more dangerous. And then my second team in the AFC East, a team that you were very high on, the Jets. I have them going 12 and 5, which might surprise a lot of people. I'm very high on this team. And Aaron Rodgers, I've never been a fan of his whole career pretty much. But everything that I've seen in this offseason, he has come out and he's being doubted right now. And it seems like when he's doubted, that's when he's the most dangerous. He won 2 MVPs in the past 3 years. And the team, like you said, he's recruited some big guys out there. Mecole Hardman is a great deep threat. Garrett Wilson, obviously coming off of a Rookie of the Year. Allen Lazard, still a good wide receiver. In this running back duo of Dalvin Cook and Breece Hall, having Dalvin Cook, who is probably still arguably a top 10 running back, be your backup running back is absolutely insane. And then, I mean, on the offensive line, you have Elijah Vera Tucker. If he can stay healthy, he's going to be good. Mekhi Becton, too. Great young guys. The defense, too, has been built up the past few years. CJ Mosley, Sauce Gardner, who is becoming one of the best defensive and overall players in the NFL. Even some other guys like DJ Reed, very underrated player overall. Carl Lawson, Quinnen Williams on that D-line. This is going to be a very high upside team. And if you guys have been watching our college football rankings, I think the Jets are very close to a team like LSU this year. They're a very big boom or bust team. And this team could go as far as possible, but they could also skid out very early and it could be ugly. But I'm going to bank on them going far. I think within this division, it's going to be competitive, but I still think they could beat teams like Buffalo, and obviously the Dolphins and the Patriots have question marks too. So that'll help them within this division. Next up, I have the Dolphins going 10-7. I do have them just missing out on the playoffs. I did have the Chargers at the 7th seed going 12-5. So the Dolphins do miss out here. Like you said, there's a lot of question marks around Tua if he can stay healthy. This team is good overall. If he can stay healthy, they could compete, especially if the Jets aren't as good as I project them to be. Next up, we have the Patriots. I have them going 7-10. I think they're a mid team overall. They have some good pieces, but like you said, when you have Mac Jones and you don't really have that many good playmakers around him, it's going to be tough. A good comparison to like Kirk Cousins that you said earlier, he still has Justin Jefferson there too. And when you have a guy like that to throw to, it makes things a lot easier. And I just don't really believe in Mac Jones overall, but that defense will help them keep them afloat. They're not going to be a terrible team this year. They're going to be around that 8-7 win mark. And I don't think they completely have to go to the rebuild yet. But if Mac Jones doesn't do great this year, with Bill Belichick possibly retiring it's in question every single year. This is going to be a very big year. If they go around 7 or 6 wins and Mac Jones isn't the answer, there's going to be a lot of question marks on if the rebuild should start.
Yeah, for sure. And I think with that being said, we covered our tracks in the AFC, gave you guys everything division by division. Let's talk about the AFC standings when we're looking at the playoffs. I can start off first. I have my guys right here. With the first seed, I have the Bengals. Second seed, I have the Chiefs. Third seed, I have the Bills. Fourth seed, I have the Jags. Fifth seed, I have the Ravens. Sixth seed, I have the Jets. And seventh seed, I have the Chargers.
Yeah. If you want to just run through the first round too, real quick.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, in that first round, that would pin up the Chiefs and the Chargers. I would have the Chiefs winning that game. Bills and the Jets, I would have the Bills. And Jags, Ravens, I would actually take the Ravens in that one.
So my 1 through 7 in the AFC, I have the Bengals first, then the Chiefs, the Bills, the Jaguars, and my wild card teams are the Ravens, the Jets, and the Chargers. So starting off, I have the Bengals with the bye. So that leaves the Jaguars and the Ravens, which would be a very fun matchup to watch. And I'm going to give the edge to the Jaguars. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to have a big year this year. But if that is a possible matchup this year, especially in the playoffs, that'll be fun to watch. Next up, I have the Chiefs and the Chargers, 2 teams that will see each other twice in the regular season this year. And I still have to give it to the Chiefs, especially if they're going to be playing in Arrowhead. I'm not going to pick against the Chiefs if they're playing at home, especially in the first round. Then we have the Bills and the Jets. This is going to be a very interesting game overall. And both of these guys, like I said before, they're going to be meeting in the regular season twice. This is where I draw the line on the end of the Jets hype, and I do give it to the Bills here.
Yeah. And then that puts us in the second round. I have the Bills and the Chiefs taking off an Arrowhead, and then the Bengals would host the Ravens. I know it's a little bit predictable, but just based on what I've seen, I got to take the Chiefs over the Bills once again. I want the Bills to succeed. Obviously, where I'm at location-wise, I'm in Bills country. A lot of people want to see that happen, but the Chiefs just always seem to have their number. And I don't know if that's going to change this year. And then Bengals, Ravens. I gave the Bengals the first seed for a reason. I gave them a bye for a reason. I think this might be their year. So with that being said, I think they easily make an AFC Championship game against the Chiefs once again.
Yeah. Same thing as you. I just have the Bengals taking on the Jaguars. I have them winning that game. I have the Chiefs beating the Bills again. So another rematch of the AFC Championship. And like you alluded to, I'm guessing you have the Bengals over the Chiefs this year.
I want to argue it for a little bit. So I completely understand having the Chiefs. They have had the Bengals number. It seems like they've had everyone's number in the Patrick Mahomes era. But I think this Bengals team is finally in a spot where it's their year to actually go out. And I'm not going to say win a Super Bowl. When we talk about the NFC, I'm going to explain how I feel about how that game would go. But I think the Bengals are definitely there this season. And the Chiefs have succeeded without a lot of wide receiver weapons in the past. But I can't lie and say that's something I'm not a little bit worried about when it comes playoff time. That's time where I was actually just watching the most recent AFC Championship game yesterday. And a lot of Patrick Mahomes' success came from dumping it down to playmakers. Obviously, we saw Isaiah Pacheco and the run game be really big last year. I don't know if he's going to repeat that success. And the Bengals just look better than ever. It seems like they improve the team every offseason. I think this is a Joe Burrow legacy season, especially after fighting through injury this preseason. So I'm all in on the Bengals hype train. I would have them winning the AFC Championship game.
Yeah. So from the opposite side, I do have the Chiefs winning this game. I think offensively too, the wide receiver room isn't that great this year. But when we're looking at Patrick Mahomes, if you gave anyone else kind of these guys with Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore and Richie James, it probably wouldn't go so well. But with a guy like Patrick Mahomes that can make things happen, I wouldn't be too worried about this depth chart overall because a lot of these guys are smaller, fast receivers, and that's just how the Chiefs have been built to. With Travis Kelce, that's going to help them continue to be better. This defense is still good too, and I just can't bet against the Chiefs at this point. I guess if Patrick Mahomes was throwing to maybe high schoolers, that'd be a little different. But some of these guys are still serviceable wide receivers overall, and I think Isaiah Pacheco, they're going to lean a little more on the run this year just because of their wide receiver situation. And I think that's going to help them too. And a lot of guys I think are going to step up this year, especially in that wide receiver room. And I expect Justin Ross to be one of those big guys this year by the end of the season. And I still have the Chiefs in the championship game up to this point. I still think they have the Bengals number, but it will be a very close game like we've seen every year.
Yeah, for sure. And if our predictions are correct and that's the game, it's going to be a great one. I think we both know that. So, I mean, with that being said, that's our AFC. We'll talk about the Super Bowl later, but for now, it's time to talk about the NFC teams. And let's start off in the NFC North. I'll let you go first.
So the NFC North overall, I would say a kind of surprisingly competitive division this year. We have the Vikings. I have them going 12-5. Their win total, very low this year, in my opinion. I think they should beat that. I'm pretty sure it's about 8.5 games. And I think this Vikings team is a little underrated overall. They're still a good team. They were the second seed last year for a reason. Obviously, they lost in the playoffs to the Giants in the first round, but they were still good in the regular season. I still have them winning the division. Another team that a lot of people are high on is the Lions. I have them going 10-7, making the playoffs as the 7th seed this year. They've continued to build. I think this is their year to make the playoffs, and they're just going to keep getting better. And next up, I have the Packers and the Bears both going 7-10. I just think both of these teams aren't really that great overall. Jordan Love, I think, will be serviceable. I think they'll be able to win some games with him. Justin Fields, I think he's going to be all right this season. I'm not as high on him as some other people are. I just think overall, both of those teams aren't really that great. And I wouldn't be surprised if Detroit can make a push and kind of compete with the Vikings this season. I just think the Vikings have a little more experience, and I just think they're a little better. That's why I have them above them.
Yeah, and we have a little bit of a flip-flop here. My number one, I do have the Lions. Obviously, this would be their first division title since the 90s, and they have all this hype. But there's no denying that the Goff and Amon-Ra duo is legit, and I think their defense steps up too. Obviously, a draft pick that we hated on draft night was Jack Campbell, the inside linebacker going early for mid-first round for the Lions. But they obviously have a lot of faith in him. And if you're going to take a middle linebacker that early and start him as a rookie, they love what they see from him for mentorship level. I know calling someone a mentor in their rookie season is ridiculous, but he knows how to be a signal caller for that defense. And if the Lions have faith in him, I think it's going to be a good addition. So I have them going first. And a team that I've kind of fallen off the train of a little bit is the Vikings. So I have going 9-8 at second. They just kind of smell like a team that could disappoint me. I'm not going to lie. A lot of it comes from running back depth. In the NFL, it feels like every team has running back depth nowadays, and the Vikings don't. Alexander Mattison, I do like, but after that, their running backs get really slim, and their offensive line and defensive line both equally scare me. They have some guys, but not as strong as they have been in the past, especially on that defensive side. If Danielle Hunter isn't like an all-pro Pro Bowler, then that's just a bad defensive line. I know Danielle Hunter is really solid, but those are kind of some hefty expectations for a guy on the wrong side of 30. And the corners just aren't good. I could see the Vikings struggling on defense quite a bit. I love the offensive addition of Jordan Addison. I expect a big year from Justin Jefferson. So they'll probably be able to score, enough to stay in games, but I don't see them being a team that's, a playoff lock. I actually have them outside of the playoffs with this projection. But similar to you, I have the Bears and Packers both going 7-10. Just based on tiebreakers, I guess I have the Bears in third, so I'll talk about them first. I think it's very imperative that Justin Fields builds a connection with DJ Moore. He needs to have trust in the number one receiver. I know your biggest criticism of him is that he doesn't even look to pass some plays. He's, a strict runner in certain situations. If he can build a good connection with DJ Moore, then I think those problems go away. Adding Yannick Ngakoue late in free agency was good. I think it adds to their 4-3 pretty well. And they're just still missing some pieces in that linebacking core that, ever since Roquan Smith left, it's been a little light there, and I think it still is. And then in fourth, I have the Packers. Jordan Love, I've always been a big fan of his. I'm excited to see him start, but they don't have a receiver over the age of like 22, and a lot of them can't catch the football. They're just really fast, so I worry about that. Separation will be fine. Actually, moving the chains might be tough. And your guy Quay Walker from Georgia as well is on this Packers team, and I want to see him play good football this year. He's a guy I'm bought in on. I think he was a steal in his draft class, so should be fun to watch. But I have the Lions being the only team in the NFC North that comes out with a playoff spot.
Yeah, I think this will be a very interesting division overall. Moving on to the next one, probably the least interesting division overall this year. We have the NFC South. It seems like throughout the past few years, the NFC East did have one year where they were the worst division, but the NFC South has been the worst division for a good amount of time. It seems like, especially with the tail end of Drew Brees' career. And I mean, the Bucs were decent the past few years with Tom Brady, obviously winning that Super Bowl a few years ago. But besides that, there's a lot of teams in this division that just aren't good. I have the Saints winning this division, going 8-9, getting a fourth spot in the playoffs. Just not that exciting overall. Derek Carr, he's going to have a okay year. He's going to probably throw for 4,000 yards like he does every season. And I think he's a little bit overhated in the NFL circle overall. Next up, I have the Bucs going 6-11. I wouldn't be surprised if they have 3 quarterbacks start this year. I think they're going to be able to pull out wins just because this division is so bad. When you play the Falcons and the Panthers twice, I think they'll be able to get 6 wins and scrape them out somehow. Next up, I have the Falcons and the Panthers both going 5-12. Some young players too. I expect Kyle Pitts to hopefully figure it out this year. I don't think his struggles throughout the first few years have been his problem. Hasn't really had a great quarterback there, to put it lightly. And Bryce Young, I think, will be good this year. I don't think he's going to be too special, but the offense that's built around him with guys like Adam Thielen, who are still good receivers, I just think if you're going to build up, if you have the number 1 pick and you draft a quarterback, I can't expect you to be that great considering you were just the worst team in the NFL last year. And if you're adding Bryce Young, who I don't think is this generational quarterback, you don't really spark up to be a playoff team.
Understandable. First, I have the Saints going 10-7. I don't think they're like a 10-7 good team or anything. Like, I don't think they're better than the Vikings. But as you mentioned, they play the NFC South over and over again. I think it's going to be easier to rack up wins that way. And when Kamara comes back, he should be enough to spark this team to at least win the division. Their defense is still good. That secondary, especially Lattimore, Matthew, Marcus May, like they got some guys back there. I think the team is solid enough to win the division. Second, I actually have the Falcons going 8-9. I don't hate this Falcons team as much as some people do. It's going to be the Bijan Robinson show. And that makes me nervous because we've seen guys like Trent Richardson go out and make it the Trent Richardson show and then fall off a cliff. I don't think that will happen with Bijan. I think he's, an actual really good running back prospect, but I do worry about that stuff. If they end up rolling with Ritter, going forward, they could use more options. You mentioned Pitts. When he's healthy, he's one of the best weapons just in general in the NFL. We just haven't seen him healthy. I think Drake London's going to be pretty solid too, but they probably need more around him in future seasons. I like Calais Campbell, Grady Jarrett. That Falcons team is all right. Third, I have the Panthers at 6-11. Bryce Young is just going to need to remain confident in the pocket like we've seen from the preseason. I like him a little more than you do. I think he's going to become a pretty good NFL quarterback, but just this Panthers team doesn't have a lot around him to make that happen this year. And then last, I have the Buccaneers going 3-14. I think they're going to be pretty bad. And when you talk about teams beating up on NFC South competition, I think the Buccaneers are going to be the team that gets beat up on because as much as we like Baker or, media likes Baker, I would say, like, he has failed in pretty much every organization he's been in his whole career. Cleveland, I know he kind of got pushed out a little bit unfairly, but Baker is not good enough to be an NFL starting quarterback for a full season. And if you think that's me, being a little too harsh, just look at every season he's played. And if they throw Kyle Trask out there, he has a little more upside, but I don't think we're going to see it anytime soon. So Evans and Godwin really have to show out. Rachaad White in the running back room needs to have a good season, but I just don't see a good season being put together. We talk about wide receivers that might be on their way out. I think that could be Evans and or Godwin pretty soon. So that Bucks team doesn't have a lot of shining points for me. The defense is good, but the secondary scares me. So they have issues on that side of the ball too. I'm just not hot on the Buccaneers this season. If you told me they were the worst team in the league when it's all said and done, I think they're definitely fighting for that spot. I wouldn't be too surprised.
Next up, we'll move out to the NFC West. In first, I have the number one overall seed in the NFC. I have the 49ers going 13-4. Next up, I have the Seahawks going 6-11. I have the Rams going 4-13, and then I have the Cardinals going 2-15. I think there's some bad teams in this division overall, and I think with the Seahawks, I think they're going to take a step back this year. I know that might be a little surprising overall. This team overall has a lot of question marks, and they just haven't been that healthy the past few seasons. And I think Geno Smith, he had a good year last year. I'm just not really staying on the hype train with them overall. The Rams team has been falling apart the past few years with no draft picks. This team is just bad, and they've just continued to get worse every single season. And then the Cardinals 2-15, that still feels like a little high for a win total. This team is very bad. Kyler Murray's not going to play. He's hurt right now. We're going to have Joshua Dobbs as the starting quarterback. James Conner at running back. He's good. I don't think he's that great, though. Wide receiver room's not that exciting. And to have the most exciting player that I want to see this year play be Paris Johnson at right tackle, not very exciting for this team overall. I think BJ Ojolari is going to have a good year just because the rest of the defense isn't really that good outside of Budda Baker, and Zaven Collins is all right. This team is just bad. And for the Cardinals, the one thing that I would be worried about is if you're really bad this year, I wouldn't be surprised if Caleb Williams stays another year. It kind of came out today between some conversations that his dad was saying. I still think they'll get a good guy because if Caleb Williams stays out, there's a lot of good options in the portal. Just overall right now of teams and wide receivers. And I mean, you're going to be able to get Marvin Harrison with one of those top, I would probably say they're probably going to get 2 top 5 picks at this point. And he's going to be good, and you'll be able to get a quarterback. Obviously, if you're this bad, you hope you can still get Caleb Williams. But even if you don't, there's going to be other guys that are going to be going into the draft that are going to be good. But besides that, the 49ers are very good. I don't expect them to take a step down at all. I'm not a huge believer in Brock Purdy, but the team that is built around him is so good that you could put almost anyone in there and they'd still get at least 11 wins. And I do think Brock Purdy's better than the average quarterback in the NFL. And if he can come out and prove that he's good this year too, then I think this team will be able to thrive. And I think the Seahawks, I'm just not really on the hype train overall this year with them.
Yeah. You said at least 11 wins for the 49ers. I have them getting 11 wins in the first spot. The team is really, really good. I'm not high on Brock Purdy either. I might even be a little bit lower than you. This team is a team that performs in the playoffs, but in the regular season, I can see them catching a couple losses in a row. Not anything on them. They also have a hard schedule if you look at it, so I understand that. Number 2, I have the Seahawks going 10-7. I think we're on different planets with this, and I understand that a regression would make sense, but I'm not going to lie. I saw that regression hitting last year, moving on from Russell Wilson, and Geno Smith looked really good. They got him on a new contract. It doesn't lock him down for too long, but it shows faith in him. They add weapons that I really like. Smith-Njigba is going to get time away from the team. He's probably going to miss. He's going to play, but he's not going to be involved in the first couple of weeks. I think he's going to come back strong, be in Rookie of the Year conversations, which we'll talk about later. But I think JSN is really good. Their defense is looking stronger than ever. Their defense was, the shining part of that team last year, especially that secondary where Tariq Woolen and some other underrated guys really came and impressed. I think they do similar this year. 10-7, it's a good win total. It has them making the playoffs for me. It's also not shocking the world, putting the league on storm. I think that's pretty fair. Rams, I have 6-11, which is a little better than I was even thinking before, doing some research. I'm worried about Stafford, obviously away from the team for almost a year with the injury. Now he's having trouble in the offseason connecting with his teammates. That's a report that came out. The defense is slowly but surely falling apart. I was, watching a video the other day. The question was, can you name 4 players on the Rams defense? My answer was no. And I talk about this stuff as a major, this is something I plan on doing. And the Rams defense is almost unrecognizable compared to the last couple of seasons. Obviously, Aaron Donald is there, but I don't like what I'm seeing from almost the whole rest of the defense. And that brings me to the Cardinals, who I also have at 2-15, because there's really not a shining part of that team. I like Buda Baker, but he's not even that exciting anymore. Zayvon Collins, as you mentioned, I think that's a good poll because Zayvon Collins is pretty solid, but the offense really doesn't have anybody on it that's going to be a big playmaker. If Hollywood Brown goes and has a really good year, that would be cool. But with Joshua Dobbs as their starting quarterback when he only landed in Glendale, Arizona about 10 days ago, that's a really big issue for me. It shows that they were going to ride with Clayton Tune, the rookie, and then he must have showed them something that they didn't like because they immediately go out and trade for Josh Dobbs, and now he's the starter. That causes some issues for me on a team that I already thought was going to be really bad. So as you mentioned, 2 wins might be a stretch. If this team goes 0-17, I don't think either of us would be too surprised.
Yeah. Next up, I guess finally in the NFC, we have the NFC East, a very interesting division overall. And first, I have the Eagles going 12-5. I do think a little bit of a regression standing wise from last year. I do think that they had a really good draft. But when you're as good as you were last year, I think a 1-loss difference isn't really too much to change. I still have them as the 2 seed. Next up, I have the Giants going 11-6. I know this is high. I'm a Giants fan, and I'm going to go through why I think they'll be good this year. I know a lot of people aren't that high on them this year. There's a lot of people predicting that they only win 7 games. But when you look at this team overall, I think Daniel Jones will continue to improve. And Saquon Barkley is going to go out there. If he's healthy, he's one of the best running backs in the NFL. Then you have some big additions too. If you want to build up Daniel Jones, getting guys like Paris Campbell and Darren Waller are huge. It seemed like everyone was a big fan of Darren Waller the past few years. And then the second that he gets traded to the Giants, everyone just completely forgets about him. When he was healthy, he was arguably, I mean, people had probably a lot of people were arguing Travis Kelce and George Kittle. Darren Waller was right in there as the 3rd best tight end in the NFL at one point. And I think he can get back up there. He had one season where he was a little banged up, but he's going to go back out there. Daniel Bellinger, I'm a very big fan of. He's one of my favorite players on this offense. And Jalen Hyatt is going to be good this year. I don't think he's going to be great necessarily. It might take him a little while to catch on, but I wouldn't be surprised if he goes out there and has some big games this year just because he has the potential to. This defense too, some big additions on the defense. And overall, I mean, the pass rush of the Giants, that combination, Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, and Kayvon Thibodeau is one of the best, if not the best in the NFL. Dexter Lawrence is one of the top guys at his position, not really talked about as much, but he is one of the best guys in his position. The one issue that I see from this team overall is kind of the secondary area, but with Xavier McKinney having a healthy season, I think he's going to go out there and be great. Jason Pinnock, not the best overall player, but I think he'll be able to pick it up too. Adoree Jackson will be fine. If Deonte Banks can go out there and play well, then that will help a lot. Darnay Holmes too. So that's the one issue that I kind of look at from this team overall. And another question mark a lot of people have is Evan Neal. He wasn't great in his rookie year. And that reminds me a lot of Andrew Thomas. Everyone was talking about how great Andrew Thomas has been, but very few people remember that Andrew Thomas was very bad his rookie season. He let up a lot of sacks, just a lot of penalties. And Evan Neal didn't play great last year. And it seems like a lot of these tackles, it takes them 2 years. And if Evan Neal can come out and just play half decent this year, this offensive line will be fine. John Michael Schmitz should go out there and have a good season. I hope he does at least. And then this offensive line will be fine. I think this team is poised for going back to the playoffs. I have them as the 5th seed going 11-6. I don't see a regression this year. I just don't see how you get better pieces and you regress in this sense. I don't really understand it at this point, especially in the NFC, which is very open with a lot of bad teams and a lot of bad divisions this year. And I think they go back to the playoffs. Next up, I have the Cowboys also going 11-6. A lot of question marks. I think their team overall is built better than the Giants. But Dak Prescott, there's a lot of question marks around him. And I don't think he's going to have too great of a year. But that defense and Dak Prescott being able to throw 300 yards and a few touchdowns when he wants to and when he's not terrible will keep them afloat in the division. I do have the Giants winning the tiebreaker though. And then I have the Commanders going 4-13. I'm a little lower on them than a lot of people. A lot of people have them around the 6 or 7 win area. I just don't think they're that great, especially competing in this division. Daniel Jones has never lost to the Commanders. So that should be 2 wins for the Giants, and the Cowboys should be able to beat them. The Eagles should be able to beat them. I have them going 0-6 in the division. I wouldn't be surprised if they do get a win or two somehow, but you're going to have to get wins outside of the division, and this team's just not great overall.
Yeah. First place, I have the Eagles going 13-4. It's time for Jalen Hurts to show if he's real or not. I don't think they regressed much either. I know they lost some guys, but equally they gained some guys. Jalen Carter is a big one. I think he should have a big year. Obviously, throughout the draft season, he rose up and then he fell a little bit. He was originally going to be the number 1 pick in most people's eyes. And then off the field stuff mixed with the Bears trading down, changed things in that aspect. But I still think he's an incredible player. Him and Jordan Davis is going to be like one of the heaviest defensive tackle duos ever. So they'll be definitely clogging up holes in the running game. 2, I have the Giants too. I'm going 10-7. I like the Giants as well. I'm not someone that's low on them either. As you mentioned, I won't add too much more because you gave a really good rundown on them. But they've improved overall as a team, and getting Saquon under contract, even if it's just 1 year, not having to fight the franchise tag running back battle is huge in the NFL. I think that was a great move from both sides where Saquon just gets to play football. And when Saquon's just playing football and is healthy, top 5 running back in the league, if not higher, top 3. Also, defense, love Xavier McKinney. I know you brought him up, but I think he's going to have another great year. Darnay Holmes is a fan favorite. Deontay Banks, really good season. So the secondary is good. Everyone knows about that front 7. That's really solid. I think 10-7 is a good spot. And I have them getting the tiebreaker on the Cowboys as well, who I also have as 10-7. I'm really excited to see Tony Pollard just be the running back 1. Big fan of his. I think he's going to have a really good year. And so I want to Trayvon Diggs. Last year, Trayvon Diggs was kind of quiet, which usually is a good thing for cornerbacks. But let's not forget, just a couple of years ago, we were fighting, some people were fighting the battle that he was the best corner in the league. I want to see him at that level again because that's exciting football. Really big ball hawk. I know he gets burned a lot, but, that's just the way he plays, especially in that man-to-man coverage that the Cowboys run a lot. And at 4th, I have the Commanders going 5-12. I like Sam Howell. I think he could have a good season, but it's just going to be tough sledding. I don't love his options outside of Terry McLaurin for the most part. I know they have some other dudes, but just not guys that I expect to have ginormous seasons or step up very much. The defense is always solid. It's Ron Rivera. The defense is coached up strong. They play, hard-nosed football, but just talent-wise, I don't love it either. I think 5-12 for the Commanders is fine. I know, as you mentioned, people will have them more like 8 or 9 wins. I think it's a bit of a stretch, especially considering I have high expectations for the Eagles, Giants, and Cowboys. I just think the Commanders are the ones that are left behind in this division.
Yeah. With all our NFC predictions going through, now we have the playoffs. I'll start real quick. Going through my 1-7, I have the 49ers, the Eagles, the Vikings, the Saints, the Giants, the Cowboys, and then the Lions. And then in the first round, I have the Saints and the Giants taking off. That will be in New Orleans, but the Giants went out and won against Minnesota last year in the first round. I think they're a better team than the Saints, and I have them moving on. The Eagles and the Lions hype train will be big, but the Eagles are overall better at pretty much every facet. I have them winning. Then the Vikings and the Cowboys, a lot of hype will be behind the Cowboys going into this game, making the playoffs again. But I think the Vikings would knock off the Cowboys at this point. I'm not going to bet for Dak Prescott in the playoffs, and I think the Vikings could go through and win this game like we've seen with a lot of Cowboys playoff games.
Yeah, and for my NFC, I have the Eagles, then the 49ers at 2, the Lions at 3, the Saints at 4, Seahawks at 5, Giants at 6, Cowboys at 7. In the first round, it would be the Seahawks going into New Orleans and playing. New Orleans, they got here because of a weak division. I don't love their team. I think the Seahawks can go in and win this game. It's funny, I have a team making it this far in the playoffs that you have looking outside of it. So definitely going to see how this Seattle season goes to see who's a little closer on that. But yeah, I have them beating the Saints first round. Then the Giants take on the Lions in Detroit. I think the Giants are just a better team. I know that might be a hot take for a lot of people, but I think the Giants go into Detroit, handle business. That would be a tough game for sure for both squads. But I like the Giants in that game if he takes off. And then the Cowboys go to San Francisco. The Cowboys love to lose first round of the playoffs. San Francisco is contending for the Super Bowl this year. I have the 49ers pretty easily in that one.
Yeah. Next up, I have the 49ers and the Giants. 49ers, just a much better team at this point. I have them winning. And then the Eagles and the Vikings, I have the Eagles winning. So far, the same four teams as we saw last year in the AFC and NFC championship. But I just think those are still the four best teams in the NFL. And then, especially in their divisions at this point, these teams are up there for a reason.
Yeah, and I hate agreeing with you, but I'm looking at the same thing here. I have the 49ers beating the Seahawks at home pretty easily. We saw a little bit of that last year, obviously division rivals. And talk about division rivals, I have the Giants going into Philadelphia here. That would be a fun game. I think the Giants, if this season goes the way I predict it, are going to have a lot of juice going into this game, especially against a division rival. But the Eagles just are the better team. I think that's a fair thing to say. And so I can't really pick the Giants in this spot. I don't necessarily know if right now they're an NFC championship level team. Obviously, we saw the Eagles in the Super Bowl last year. I would say that they are. So I got the same four teams as well. It would be, it's a little bit of chalk right there, but these four teams have shown over and over again why they deserve to be up here. And I think it would almost be a little bit disrespectful to not give some credit to them and put them here.
Yeah. So I guess with our predictions, you have the Eagles at home in this game, right?
Yes.
So how do we see that playing out? I have the 49ers at home for.
So home field advantage is tough, but I mean, just talking about the game in general, I would still take the 49ers going on the road into Philadelphia here. And I know that we see people predict the 49ers to make the Super Bowl every year and they fall up a little bit short. But I don't think the Eagles are a team that goes back to back Super Bowl appearances. I just think the 49ers are better. If Brock Purdy is at a point where he's brought this team all the way to the NFC Championship, then I'm not worried about his talent of play. So he's not a factor I'd be too worried about in this game. And just comparing rosters, I love what the 49ers are doing just a little bit more. And I think they're a little bit better coached. I know that might be a hot take. People really like the coaching in Philadelphia, Nick Sirianni, but I like the coaching in San Francisco much more. They're much more creative. Christian McCaffrey could win a team and game by himself. I could say the same thing about Deebo Samuel. And when it comes to the defense, I have a lot of faith in it. The defense could win the team. They just have so many aspects of this team that could show up and just win a game by themselves. And with the Eagles missing out on some guys that they had last year that made big impacts, like especially CJ Gardner-Johnson, he's a big name that I think they lost that some people aren't talking about enough. I just like this 49ers team more. I mean, I think there's a lot to say about both squads, but if the 49ers can make it all the way to the NFC Championship game this year, I don't see why they're not a Super Bowl squad.
Yeah, and you pretty much said everything, but I have the 49ers at home, so it makes it a little easier for me to have them winning this game. And I think they get past the Eagles this year. And with Brock Purdy healthy, it'll be a very different game from last year where he got hurt within the first quarter and the Eagles went on to win that game. But with our Super Bowl matchups now, we had different AFC champions. In my Super Bowl, I have the Chiefs and the 49ers, so a rematch from a few years ago. And up to this point, if the Chiefs make the Super Bowl and they're playing against the 49ers, I do think the 49ers roster is built better. But if I'm betting against the quarterbacks in this sense, and in the Super Bowl, it comes down to the quarterbacks. If you're going to give me Patrick Mahomes versus Brock Purdy, I can't bet against Patrick Mahomes. And I do have the Chiefs repeating in the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, and you mentioned it comes down to the quarterbacks in the Super Bowl. I have the Bengals taking on the Niners. I would take the Bengals in that Super Bowl. I think it's time for Joe Burrow. Obviously, just in it a couple of years ago, lost to the Rams. I think it's time for him to win that first bowl. He's obviously one of the most talented quarterbacks we've seen in a little bit. He's completely deserving of it. So if he can lead this Bengals team that's incredibly talented to the Super Bowl, I think he knocks off the 49ers. Definitely a legacy game, legacy year for Burrow and the Bengals. But, in this hypothetical matchup, I think the Bengals take it.
Yeah. So moving on from our Super Bowl predictions to wrap this video up, we do have some award predictions, and we'll start off at the bottom, starting off with our comeback player of the year. I have my top three options. I'll just go from the bottom to the top for this one. I think if Damar Hamlin plays a snap this year, he's going to win the award. Two other guys that I would have up there is Lamar Jackson and John Mechie. I think both of them, different scenarios, obviously, but if John Mechie can go out and have a good year, especially after what he went through last year, he could definitely be up there. And Lamar Jackson, I think, is going to have a big year. So I have him up there. But Damar Hamlin, if he plays a snap, he's going to win the award, as he should.
Yeah, much respect to anyone else fighting for the award, but I didn't even put three options here. It's going to be Damar Hamlin. He's going to get to play this year, which is incredible. And call the Comeback Player of the Year award what you want. Some people are going to be mad because, he's not a Pro Bowl or anything. It doesn't matter. He's coming back and coming back from, the situation he went through and performing at an NFL level, a starting NFL level is just absolutely incredible. Got to be him. Respect to Damar. And, hoping he has a good season to go along with this award, which I think he'll win as well.
Next up, we have Coach of the Year. And my top three candidates, I'll start from the bottom. And third, I have Dan Campbell. I think with the Lions making the playoffs in my scenario, I think he would definitely be up there. And if they have a little better of a year than I project, he definitely could be up there. At number two, I have Doug Peterson. I think the Jaguars are going to be really good this year, which puts him up there. But my number one coach of the year at this point, if you guys were paying attention to my predictions throughout this year, I have the Jets having a really good year. So that puts Robert Saleh as my coach of the year. If they turn it around and have a good season like I project and make the playoffs, it's going to be really tough. But if the Jets and the Lions and the Jaguars all make the playoffs, between those three guys, I think it just depends on which team does the best. And I do have the Jets doing the best out of those three. That's why I have him winning the award this year.
Yeah, for me in the third spot, I have Mike Tomlin. Obviously, he's kind of a perennial name in here. As you notice, I didn't put the Steelers in the playoffs, but if they do make it in any right, I think Mike Tomlin's going to be in the conversation. At two, I have Zach Taylor. Obviously, I have the Bengals winning the Super Bowl. I have them being the first seed in the AFC. So Zach Taylor is going to get some nods there. Zach Taylor, a guy that in the past I had no faith in and just completely came around and is just one of the best coaches in the NFL. So that was definitely one of my worst takes I've ever had. And in first, I have Doug Peterson. I think the Jags are going to have a really good season. We're going to see Trevor Lawrence play at an exceptional level. And if they make the playoffs as a pretty decently high seed, which I expect them to do, I think Doug Peterson is going to be well deserving of it.
Next up, we have the Defensive Rookie of the Year award. This one, very up in the air. There's a lot of different options to go with. In my third spot, I have Will Anderson. I think he's going to have a really good year. I just don't think he's going to have as good of a year as these top two guys. And number two, I have Nolan Smith. I'm a very big Nolan Smith fan overall, and I think he's going to be able to have a big impact on that defense. And I think if the Eagles are good, he's going to be able to go out there and play very well too. And at number one, who I think is going to come away with the trophy this year is Tyree Wilson. I think he's going to have a very big year, especially on a defense that isn't too great overall. That definitely helps you shine. And being on the edge, I would say it's a lot easier to win the award on the edge, especially compared to a cornerback or a safety or a linebacker. As if you're a cornerback and want to win the Defensive Player of the Year award, you have to rack up those interceptions. I think Tyree Wilson's in a very good position, and he's a very good player too. He's going to be able to go out there, and if he can get close to double-digit sacks as a rookie, which I think he has the potential to, he's going to run away with this award.
Yeah. Defensive Rookie of the Year, my third spot, I have Jack Campbell. Talked about him earlier when we talked about the Lions. If you can be a true Mike linebacker and a good one in the NFL as a rookie, I think you're going to get a lot of credit there. Two, I have Jalen Carter, who's another guy I mentioned. He's, his position is going to make it tough because the counting stats aren't going to look as great, but I think he's going to have a big impact right away for that defense. So, another guy on the Eagles defense that you mentioned, Nolan Smith, I think will also get up numbers. I think he might have better numbers than a guy like Carter. I think Carter might have a little bit more of an impact. So that would be an interesting situation. And my number one is Will Anderson. I just think he's going to have the most opportunities. He's already probably the best player on that Texans defense. If not number one, he's top three. And he's going to get a lot of chances to rush the quarterback. He's in an AFC South that historically right now doesn't have a great offensive line to show for. So he's going to get opportunities. He's obviously an incredible player. Not a super hot take, but I really wouldn't be surprised if Will Anderson, is a menace year one. Reminds me a lot of Kayvon Thibodeau in certain ways. So I think Defensive Rookie of the Year is a realistic goal for him.
Yeah. Next up, on the opposite side of the ball, the Offensive Rookie of the Year. In my third spot, I have Bryce Young. I think out of all the rookie quarterbacks this year, I put the most trust into him. I think Anthony Richardson will be good. I'm not sure how good he'll be. I don't know if he's completely NFL ready in his first year. That's why I kind of give the nod to Bryce Young. I'm not really sure how good CJ Stroud will do because of that offense, but I do give Bryce Young probably the best chance out of all the quarterbacks. Next up, I have Zay Flowers in the 2 spot. And I've been really high on him all season. I said in March when we were doing our predictions about where players would go to in our mock drafts, I said, if he could fit in Baltimore. If they can draft him, it would be the perfect fit. And they got him, and I'm very excited to watch him play, especially with Lamar Jackson. I'm expecting Lamar to have a big year. And with Odell over there too, that gives more room for Zay Flowers to go and play in the slot and be a fantastic, productive receiver for them this year. And then my number one, to no surprise, Bijan Robinson. He's going to be the Falcons team, and I think he's going to have a massive year this year. I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the top 5 rushing yards between all running backs overall. If they feed him the ball and the Falcons team is somewhat decent and he has really good counting stats, which I completely expect him to, I think he goes and takes this award, and there's not very much competition behind him.
Yeah. Offensive rookie of the year, third, I have Bryce Young. Pretty much all the reasons you said. Probably the rookie quarterback I expect to have, the best, numerical season. I don't think the Panthers are going to be very good. I think he's going to be pretty solid. Do have Jahmyr Gibbs. Speaking of counting stats, I think he's going to rack up a lot of receiving yards for a running back. And, obviously the rushing will come with it. David Montgomery and him are going to split snaps. So I really can't see him winning it, especially when the number one guy for me is Bijan Robinson, who's just going to have incredible amounts of volume. If he is as good as we expect him to be, his stats are going to be ridiculous. And honestly, even if he's not as good as we think, he's going to get enough touches to probably get him an offensive rookie of the year on his own. So really like him right there. I think he's going to be a great player. I think offensive rookie of the year is something that should be under his belt unless something goes wrong, injury, just doesn't live up to expectations. But I'm a Bijan fan. I think he'll have a good year.
Yeah. Next up, Defensive Player of the Year. Starting in my 3 spot, I have Micah Parsons. I still think he's a little far away from this award. I do think he's one of the best players in the NFL to this point, but I don't have him winning the award this year. Number 2, I have Myles Garrett. I still think that between him and TJ Watt, it's going to be very tough, but I do have him kind of edging out TJ Watt. I don't have TJ Watt in my top 3, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's up there. And number 1, I have Aaron Donald. I think he's going to have a really good year. And like you said before, this Rams defense doesn't have too many great players or good players overall, but there's a lot of people betting against Aaron. I think people have said that he's starting to decline at this point. He's not the favorite to win the Defensive Player of the Year at this point, but I still do think he's one of the best players in the NFL total. And he's going to go out there and prove that he is one of the best players at his position all time, and I have him winning the award this year.
Yeah, and I like that take. At third, I have TJ Watt. Obviously, he's been in this conversation for years now. Just an incredible pass rusher. That Steelers defense always finds ways to creatively use him. I think he'll have another big season. Second, I have Micah Parsons. And I see a lot of people betting on Micah Parsons, but when you're a versatile defender, sometimes your stats aren't going to look as good, or, voting isn't going to go in your favor. And I think that's just the story of Micah Parsons. He's supposed to be fully an edge rusher this year. I don't think that's going to happen. He's still going to get linebacker snaps, maybe even slot corner safety snaps would be interesting like he did in college. But at number 1, I do have Myles Garrett. We've talked about this before. I just think he's probably the best overall defensive player in the league right now. It's him or Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald, I'm only worried about because that Rams defense is so bad. I expect a lot of double teams, which is going to mess up his numbers a little bit. But Myles Garrett is on a Cleveland defense, which is competitive at different positions. You can't, in the past, they've messed around and just double teamed him every play. You're not going to be able to do that this year with Cleveland's defense that they're running. So I think Myles Garrett's going to have big opportunities. He's really good. He's going to shine in those opportunities. I think he's going to win the Defensive Player of the Year this year.
Yeah, and I think overall, this award total is probably the most competitive that we've seen. And I don't think there's been a lot of people talking about how the edge rushing position is probably the deepest and has the best overall players in the NFL to this point. I mean, guys that we're talking about, Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett, Aaron Donald, TJ Watt, all of these guys, I mean, you could argue are all top 15 players, and they're all vying for the same award, and it's very competitive. I mean, the Defensive Player of the Year award is basically the MVP for the defensive players, and it's going to be very competitive this year.
Yeah, for sure.
And moving on to the Offensive Player of the Year award. At 3, I have Justin Jefferson. He had a great year last year, and I know he's probably the favorite to win this award. I just think other players will probably perform a little better than him this year. I still think he's going to have a good year, but I think teams will start to figure out him a little more defensively than they did last year. Number 2, I have Ja'Marr Chase. I think he's going to have a really good year. I think he's going to have better counting stats than Justin Jefferson this year. That's why I have him a little higher. And then at number 1, I have Nick Chubb. I know he's a big candidate for people to fall off. I've seen a lot of ESPN writers say that he's not going to be as productive as he was last year. I completely disagree. I think Nick Chubb's going to go out here and have a lot of touchdowns this year. I think he's going to fill that role that we've seen previously that Austin Eckler's had, especially. A lot of people are big fans of Austin Eckler in fantasy. I don't think he's the best running back overall, just because there's a lot of holes, I would say, in Austin Eckler's game. I think he's definitely very good. But Nick Chubb reminds me of a guy like Austin Eckler who's going to get a lot of good counting stats this year, but is just a very good offensive player overall. I mean, Nick Chubb can go out there and win a game by himself. If you hand the ball off to him, he can get 150 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns a game. And I think if he can maintain his progress that he's made every year, he can go out and be that number 1 running back in the NFL and win this award.
Yeah, in my third spot, I have Saquon Barkley. I know it's a little higher than a lot of people would, but I expect this Giants team to be really good, and I expect it to be mostly because of Saquon Barkley. I think he's going to go out and have a really good year. I'm assuming we don't predict injuries. I'm assuming he's healthy, which, if he's healthy, he's one of the best players in the league in general. I think people forget that because he's had so many banged up seasons, but I expect Saquon to be really good this year. So I really wanted to give him credit and put him in that third spot. Second, I battled between Jefferson and Chase. I'll say Jefferson just for the argument's sake. Obviously, talent-wise, we know he's incredible. He has just this way of getting open that almost no one else in the league does. And if Kirk can find him, he's going to get big play after big play. Hopefully, teams don't figure him out just because he's exciting to watch, but I could also see that too. And at number 1, I have Christian McCaffrey. With the decision for the 49ers to make Brock Purdy their starter, that solidified it for me because Brock Purdy loves getting Christian McCaffrey involved, and I don't blame him. He's just an incredible athlete, great running the ball downhill, but obviously dangerous in space in the passing game or outside runs. And with 49ers offensive line that seems to produce every year and wide receiver options that are going to spread out corners, I think CMC is going to have a lot of room to work. And just like Saquon, if he's healthy, he's a top tier player in the league right now. I think he has another big year. He's my number 1 guy.
And for the best player in the NFL award, the MVP, the quarterback award, I only have quarterbacks in this position just because I feel like the NFL has especially started to move towards that. Before, we've seen quarterbacks win offensive player of the year, but it seems like we're finally getting to the point where the offensive player of the year, more skill position, and the MVP is starting to become quarterbacks, unless we obviously see an amazing year, 2,000 plus yards from a running back, but I don't really see that happening this year. And number 3, I have Aaron Rodgers. I think the Jets are going to be good this year, and I think he's going to go out and have a great year. That's why I have him there. Lamar Jackson, I have at number 2. I think he's going to have a big year also. The Ravens are going to be very competitive this year, and I think Lamar Jackson's going to get back to that MVP caliber area. And then at number 1, I have the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl, and I have Patrick Mahomes winning the MVP. These were my exact predictions last year, and they both went through. So we'll see if it happens again, but Patrick Mahomes is still the best player in the NFL, and if I'm giving out an MVP award and prediction, I can't go against the best player in the NFL in my eyes.
Yeah, for sure. In my third spot, I have Lamar Jackson. Obviously, a big fan of his. Again, healthy. When he's healthy, he's really, really good. And I think this Ravens team is going to be a playoff squad, so I see him having another big year. Obviously, being a dual threat and being able to rack up rushing yards looks good on your resume, too. Number 2, I have the best player in the league. I have Mahomes. You'll be able to guess number 1. But Mahomes is obviously going to fight for this award every year. Wouldn't be surprised at all if he wins it. He's the favorite for a reason. He just plays great football. The Chiefs are a really good team. We know they're fighting for the Super Bowl. So I expect him to have another big year. And number 1, to go along with my big Bengals predictions, I'm going to put Joe Burrow here. I really do think it's his year. I think people are a little scared because of that injury. Some people may have forgot by now, but most of what I heard is people being worried about that injury. I'm not worried. Burrow is just a top tier level guy. And if the Bengals are a team that's number 1 in the AFC, pushing for Super Bowl, and in my case, winning the Super Bowl, I got to ride with Burrow at that point. He obviously has the weapons with Chase and Higgins and Mixon as well. I'm not worried about him finding guys open down the field. I'm worried about him staying on the field. And when he's on it, he's a guy that's going to be in this conversation. I'll roll with Joe Burrow.
Yeah, overall, I mean, a lot of predictions in this video. It's our complete season predictions. So there's, like I said at the beginning of the video, there's probably going to be more that's wrong, that's right. But if we get some things right, especially with these predictions in the playoffs, and hopefully at least one of us gets the Super Bowl prediction right, I expect one of us to get the MVP right. I think it's going to be very close between Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes this year, and the Chiefs and the Bengals overall. So hopefully by the time we come back and make this video, maybe we'll make a reaction video to some of our predictions towards the end of the year, depending on how things go. If it goes really bad, probably not. But if it goes really well, we will definitely make a video on how
For
great
sure.
our predictions were. We were very close with a lot of these. I would say the big team that we were probably far off on was the Seahawks. I was very surprised that we were both very high on the Jets and the Giants overall. So that was great to see. Going through, obviously, we'll be continuing with the podcast every week. So you guys will be able to see as the season goes, our reactions to everything. And with that being said, we will see you guys next week. We'll have the podcast starting back up next week to talk about the NFL and eventually the NBA season, which will start up in about a month and a half. So hopefully you guys like these predictions, and let us know down below what you guys disagree with, because I guarantee there's going to be at least something.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And thank you guys for all the support. We love, how it's been going. When we get likes, we get views. Obviously, it encourages us to keep making the videos. This is a really long one. So really appreciate the love. Please show some more. And we'll catch you guys in the next one. Thank you so much.